Most new backpackers end up rebuilding their entire kit after the first year, but you don't have to. If I had to start from zero tomorrow, these are the 5 decisions that would cut down on wasted money, cold nights, and regret that took me years to find out. I'm Chris from StepMassive, and after more than a decade on trail with hundreds of nights in the backcountry, these are the lessons I wish someone had handed me before I wasted years learning them the hard way. This is the backpacking blueprint I wish I had. So like most beginners, I started with the cheapest setup that looked trail ready. A foam pad, a budget tent, a 5-pound sleeping bag. It worked for a few trips, but before long, I was staring at my friend's ultralight quilt, wondering why I hadn't started there. And that's how the upgrade spiral usually begins. So you buy the entry-level gear thinking that it'll get you by, but then every trip starts showing you what you actually need for real comfort. The problem isn't that budget gear is bad, it's that it rarely lasts beyond the beginner phase before you start replacing half your setup. And once you upgrade to gear that actually keeps you warm, dry, and rested, the whole experience in the backcountry changes. You can set aside worrying about your gear and whether it'll make it through a trip and focus on your intention, enjoying the outdoors. Now, if your budget's tight, use what you have. Experience always beats waiting for perfect gear. But if you're at the point of choosing between good enough and gear that you know you won't have to second guess later, go with the one that'll actually make your time on trip easier. Once you start buying for comfort up front, you'll stop upgrading your gear and start actually backpacking. And if this is helping you build a setup that finally feels easy and comfortable, hit subscribe. That's what every video here is built for. So when I first started backpacking, I was convinced that I needed a single wall, ultralight trekking pole shelter. That was the system that all the real backpackers were using, and on paper, it looked perfect. The lightest weight, tiny pack down size, and supposedly the smartest way to cut a pound or more from my kit. So I bought one, felt proud of the weight savings, and thought I had leveled up. But what I didn't realize is that lightest doesn't always mean easiest. And it didn't take many trips before I realized the trade-offs hit harder than I had expected. Pitching a trekking pole tent in rocky ground was slow. Getting clean tension in the wind took a lot of practice. And every wet night reminded me how much I still had to learn about managing condensation. Meanwhile, my buddies who were using freestanding tents were already eating while I was still fighting with my guidelines. I ultimately decided to swap out my ultralight shelter for a lightweight double wall tent, the Big Agnes Copper Spur. Now, my tent setup every night is faster, calmer, and way less frustrating. Now, single wall shelters are great for a lot of people, and I'm not knocking them. Lots of experienced backpackers love them and use them with zero issues. So this isn't saying that like one style is wrong, but it's understanding that sometimes there's a trade-off between the weight savings and being comfortable. And knowing what actually fits your skills and your energy on trail is key when building out your kit. So there's nothing worse than crawling into your sleeping bag, seeing that 20-degree rating on the tag, and still freezing all night. When I bought my first sleep system, I trusted that temperature rating like it was a promise. I thought 20 degrees on the tag meant that I'd be warm at 20 degrees. That idea lasted exactly one cold night with sub-freezing temps. Even with temperatures in the high 20s, I'd still end up curling tight, dealing with drafts, and wondering why it felt colder than it should have. That's when I realized what a lot of beginners eventually discover, just how big the gap is between lab ratings and real world conditions. Those temperature ratings don't always account for humidity, wind, body types, or the fact that you sleep colder at the end of longer days. Many beginners fall into the same trap. They compare weight, price, and the temperature rating and assume that's all they need to know. Then the first cold night hits and it becomes obvious that a bag or quilt that is rated for it on paper doesn't always feel rated for it when you're actually out there. And if your sleeping pad also isn't warm enough with a high enough R value, then none of the other specs matter anyways. So here's the fix. Give yourself a margin. Pick a bag rating that feels conservative instead of aggressive, and make sure your pad provides real ground protection and insulation. And yes, if you want true cold performance and ultralight weight, you will have to spend more for high quality down or synthetic insulation. And that ties right back to making a commitment upfront to invest in your comfort early. And I'm curious, have you ever had a night out where the bag rating just didn't hold up? Drop your coldest gear fail in the comments. I read everyone, and there's always something to learn from those moments. So one of the biggest upgrades I ever made wasn't a piece of shelter or sleep gear. It was switching out from heavy, slow drying footwear. When I first started, I figured hiking boots were the safest choice. They looked durable, they felt supportive, and every store employee told me they were the right tool for backpacking. But after one trip in heavy boots, my feet were cooked. The boots were slow to dry, they rubbed my feet raw, and it felt like dumbbells attached to my ankles. Eventually, it was switching from hiking boots to trail runners that solved all those problems. They were lighter, faster to dry, and they caused way less fatigue in most conditions. And I was surprised how well they held up on rough terrain. And when your feet move well, everything upstream benefits. You hike smoother, your balance improves, and your energy lasts longer. Now, plenty of backpackers do still prefer hiking boots, and if they work for you, keep using them. The point isn't that one style is always better. It's that foot comfort does impact performance, and trail runners are not always the most obvious pick for newcomers. So ultimately, you want footwear that bends with your feet, dries fast, breathes well, and doesn't weigh you down. When your feet stay happy, the whole trip feels easier. If I was starting today, one of the first things I'd fix is eliminating some of those small, repetitive chores that eat up your energy at camp. Because it's not always the big tasks like setting up your tent or gathering water that wears you down. It's also the dozens of tiny steps you have to repeat just to get through a night at camp. And when those steps are slow or disorganized, the whole night can feel heavier than it needs to. So I'd build and implement systems from the start that keep camp simple. For cooking, I now use a single pot, and my entire cook kit fits into my Toke's titanium pot. This keeps everything stored together, so I'm not managing different pieces of cookware or hunting for parts. My whole cook system stays fast, predictable, and easy to clean up. For water purification, I like to set up a gravity system at camp whenever possible. A basic gravity setup lets you filter your water while you handle other camp chores, and you can even do it with the popular squeeze style filters by using a bag with a handle and just hanging it from a tree branch. And a few smart habits like having dedicated stuff sacks for different types of gear and color coding them just make everything smoother. So optimizing your gear and your systems ultimately sets you up with a foundation that's gonna make your trips much easier. And if you want more tips for making your backpacking setup easier and more comfortable, make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Also, let me know in the comments what system or small routine has made the biggest difference for you on trail. And if you want more upgrades that instantly boost comfort, check out this next video. It walks through 5 of my best backpacking gear upgrades for comfort. So thanks for watching, start dialing in your system, and I'll see you on the trail.